We have a panel of innovators who've innovated in service, innovated in curriculum, innovative in the arts. And so for our final symposium, we're sharing the work of 4 highly innovative educators who will each share something which they have developed based on the insights they have developed that are spiritually supportive in their educational spaces. We have Aurelie Athan from right here at Teachers College, very Jungian in her training and wisdom. We have Michael Brosnan, who, as you know, is the editor of Independent School Magazine, who many of you know well through years of reading his work and his vision. We have Bridget McGoldrick from the Annie Wright School in Tacoma, Washington. And we have Christopher Tate from the Porter Gaud School in Charleston, South Carolina. We are delighted to learn from you and grateful that you're here and look forward to what you share about innovation. Thanks. Come on up.
Hi, everyone. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I just want to thank especially our previous presentation for shifting us into sort of a different way, different language using story and image and metaphor. It was very helpful to me, setting a different pace and space. And also for that notion of the crayons, because there's a lot of students here in my class who gave me their crayons for this presentation. So I'm very grateful for that. So I'm going to borrow heavily from 2 texts that have influenced my own work as a psychologist and educator, the Book of Symbols, which I've had the privilege of helping with, and Jungian Education, which provides the conceptual basis for this presentation. So I teach psychology, so by definition I'm interested in both pedagogy, the ideal conditions for learning and optimal practice, and what psychology reveals about the human condition, its challenges and need for healing. Psychology and education have long been married, with psychological theories on human development trickling down into curricular development and other applications, especially here at TC. So I thought to just share a couple of quotes by our very own Edward Thorndike. Though I believe the relationship to be bidirectional, these are prescient nonetheless in pointing to the assistance of psychology in enlarging the boundaries of what is thought to be central to educating our generations. And Lisa is our next boundary expander. So today in this conference, we explore the new frontier of spiritual health as we have done for other domains in the past. To that end, I would like to invite another psychologist by the name of Carl Jung to continue our exploration. While not the only one, he was the first major psychologist of the 20th century to take spiritual issues seriously, as important in their own right as essential to health. This reorientation from mind to psyche, which means spirit or soul, has critical implications for a spiritual informed pedagogy, as it places deep knowledge of one's spiritual reality as primary. This spiritual sense resides within the self, is connected to the transcendent or sacred dimension that is the ultimate driving force of personal development, and by virtue requires initiation and cultivation. I would like to now invite us to imagine what that might look like in the classroom, not only in the treatment office or in the church or synagogue. So how do we do it? Luckily, it's not that hard. We just had an example of it. It's part of our birthright, a muscle we have flexed since the dawn of man, but may find in need of exercise. We do it through our symbolic imagination. The psyche is naturally symbol producing. Some call it the mythopoetic mind or our creativity. It is the stuff that makes up our dreams, our religion, our art, our poetry, the humanities, and we have used it from the cave paintings of Lascaux to our digital revolution. Most importantly, it is critical to our self-development and spiritual health. Becoming fully realized or individuated, to use Jung's terms, requires us to embrace our symbolic life. It is the portal to the transcendent dimension, where the mind of man meets the mind of God, or where the self with a small s meets the self with a capital S. It is the lightning bolt of spiritual experience and insight. Symbolic knowing offers a way back to life in relation and in dialogue with the sacred. And kind of a fun quote by Jung there. We'll move it on. So what is a symbol? A crash course in symbols will do, or maybe even skip over with the time, because I want you to really see what our students have done with it. At the bare minimum, it is the best possible expression for something that cannot be expressed otherwise than by a more or less close analogy. Our spiritual experiences often lack words to describe what we've experienced. It resides in the unknown, waiting to be made known. It is the best possible expression for a complex fact not clearly yet apprehended. I like to think of it actually as a zip file that is compressed and looking to be opened. Okay. There's a beautiful meditation around metaphor that I cannot read without my glasses, so I will invite you to. Let's see. I am the wind on the sea. I am the wave on the ocean. I am the sound of the billows. I am the fairest of flowers. And now my favorite quote ever, and it is in the Book of Symbols. Here. When the soul wants to experience something, she throws out an image in front of her and then asks us to step into it. Isn't that beautiful? To understand a symbol, one must engage in a living interaction and dialogue with it. A symbol is the echo of God's voice calling out to the self, to us each individually. And this is how I often start in my class, asking students to reflect on themes and symbols that are intimately familiar with or that they find new and bizarre. But to get the process going even faster, I actively attempt to create the conditions for them to draw out these symbols themselves, for psyche to rise up and find them. We use the analogy of fishing. This was actually one of the students who found a fisherman from the Sama-Bajo tribe who just hand fishes like this. And they said that sort of reminded us of what we were doing. So we create a lot of fish in the ocean. Lots and lots of random images that have been collected and torn. My poor family, I'm always tearing out images from anything I receive in the mail. And then we start to fish. We ask our logical, critical mind, we thank it for all it's done for us, and we ask it to take a back seat for a moment and just start to feel through the images to something that resonates, that has heat. We start to fish. And then we start to bring it up on the wall to relate to and dialogue with. And as soon as self-portrait emerges with each individual. At that moment and for the next few days, I felt such strong emotion when I looked at the collage, a graphic representation of parts of my life. How and where things are placed are important. In the center here, we have the Father. But then we start to ask, what does it mean? Have you ever felt stretched? Or maybe in need of a trim? Or like a living waterfall in our sorrow? Or something that just seems unimaginable? And we ask to look at real of the details. Is the boundary fragile? Are we breaking from the inside out or the outside in? All of these details are incredibly important. And then we also look for something that we might need to compensate or need to complement. If our balloon is maybe flying too high, do we need an anchor? Here's a real image from a student. We ask, what is your reaction? This one, this is a pill connected to a stone with a thread that it represented my discomfort with my place in science. But it began to feel like a private conversation that started to unfold. I'm going to move forward because I'm running out of time already. And then we also rearrange. We ask, what is the most important thing that you see here? And we pulled out the shaman and the pilot and the doctor, as suddenly we turned the shaman into a shaman with aviators, that to heal is to actually pilot our inward geography with a controlled trance, and expertise. So the healing image, we often get a true healing image. This is one of my most moving that I have felt. The student says that they had abandoned their spiritual child as a way to survive in the world, denying a critical part of his identity. And here the healing image of the communal table rises up and says, you have a place at the table. And the watermelon, no one person can eat a whole watermelon. It must be shared. So we must go deeper. Okay, and we find lots of compensatory images. By the way, these are 5 different students across time and space showing very remarkably similar imagery. And we look at the archetypal realm, and then we send them, this is very important, to my most favorite of places, ARAS, the Archives for Research on Archetypal Symbolism, where the curator, Ami, is here in the audience. And we also have Bridget, who has done her own program on youth development. So we can also fish even younger. In fact, they really know how to do this. And so, Bridget, you've created something called Pioneer Teens, and it's part of the Education in Teens program at the archives. And we do the very same process with 15-year-olds. And I just want to show you a couple, and then you bring them out to the they do their research. They go out to the museums. They are mentored by other artists. They make. And boy, do they make. The mandrake and the phoenix. Here at the Crossroads in the Forest was the archetypal imagery that rose out of this one teen that actually, I think there are 2 of them working together. Yeah. They work as partners, so the community. And here we see the crossroads. We often feel the dark and the light. Very, very powerful images. I think this is quite beautiful. This is the homelessness and misfits. And the hands and the lamb. Now, if only you could take some time to read what we had below. But there's deep understanding that this symbol has now started them unfolding on a path. And if I may take 30 more seconds to give you the microphone to say a few words.
So it's a 2-week program, and for myself, coming from, I'm a 5th grade teacher. I've been working in education in museums and in classrooms, a world of standards and measurable outcomes and assessment and time, and there's never enough time. And so when I came into contact with ARAS and with Aurelie and, just started to sort of recognize this resource as, having this amazing potential to encourage exploration. This 2-week program came to be Pioneer Teens, simply called that because I didn't know what it was going to become. They were pioneers, and we've been doing it for 2 summers now. And basically, on the first day, Aurelie works with them to pick these symbols, and then over the 2 weeks, they create their own artwork in response to it. And I see I have to go, but. Modern day rite of passage.
Yes. Good afternoon. It's intimidating to go at this hour of the day for a variety of reasons. Usually I take a nap around this time of day rather than speak, but also the conversation today has been so engaging, and I found myself rewriting and editing my notes in light of what everyone else is saying. And also realizing that I'm not going to get through all of it anyway, but I'll just jump right in here. Also, I want to say that I'm not an expert on education or on innovation. My work, I'm Michael Brosnan. I'm the editor of Independent School Magazine. It is published by the National Association of Independent Schools in Washington, D.C. And I started this job in 1993 thinking it was a bridge job, that do it for a few years and I'll move on to something else. But lo and behold, I got so engaged in this conversation on education, I just kept going and going and going, and I'm looking up now, it's 20-something years later, and I'm still deeply engaged in the conversation. Partly that's a reflection of you, of this amazing community of people that I've met in the process of putting together this magazine. It's amazing work, and partly what I want to talk about today is what I see is the spirituality in your work. Innovation, spirituality, education. Of the three, the one that gives me pause is innovation. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired of the term, perhaps because many of those wielding the word use it as a club to bash schools, to criticize educators, to say that what you have been doing all these years has not been good enough. And hey, I have the solution, the way to fix it, so to improve education. Innovation is right up there on my list of troubling words with rigor and disruption. There's truth to the notion that we need to improve or evolve schools, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially in the public school sphere. But who doesn't already know that? And who is arguing that education should never evolve? My sense is that we do innovate as a matter of professional practice, always have. But now, with so much outside pressure to change in big ways, we need to be careful about how fast we move, how much we change, how much we should push. It really needs to feel right for us, I think. Jim Collins, I don't know if you know Jim Collins, he's a sort of a business guru, and he says in his writing on Good to Great in the business and in the private institutions, suggests that we should never change more than 30% of what we're doing. I think that's the number. But we always need to preserve the core, our mission. That feels about right to me. I will say more about innovation in a minute, but I first want to look at the next word in spirituality and actually use these slides here. All right, I got them backwards. I'll do it this way. This is my dog, Abby. She owns this beach. We go here, this is Rye Beach in New Hampshire. We go here at least twice a week, maybe less in the wintertime, but we try to go year-round. She just loves the place. Walking along the beach with her, I started this past sometime this summer taking out my camera and just taking photos. These are almost all of sunrise, but some of them are later in the afternoon, of the same beach. Well, just an iPhone. There's nothing fancy about them, but this is the collage I'm putting together. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I seem to end up with these small art projects once in a while. If I'm being honest, my form of spirituality is not based on organized religion. It involves a close connection with nature, with a sense of being part of something much bigger and far more interesting than myself. Poet Charles Simic, who teaches at the University of New Hampshire nearby, writes, "Awe, A-W-E, is my religion, and mystery is its church." I'm with Charlie. In that regard, I guess I'm not much different from a cockapoo. But I know I'm not alone, which explains why so many people want to be near the shore. Although I was steeped in Catholicism, Catholic elementary school, altar boy, the sacraments, Jesuit-run boarding school, Jesuit-run college, I have moved away from organized religion. But in some ways, I think, this distance has only deepened my spirituality. I started taking these photos of the beach without any plan, but I see now that awe is part of it, beauty too, and that the clear sense of the way time and change and evolution are intertwined. There is an aesthetic sense about what is beautiful, what is amazing, and what is worth contemplating. I believe that this has much to do with our work in schools. I'm offering two competing major views on education here that I've been seeing lately. Here's one. What can be done to tip the scales toward a resilient and flourishing future? This is part of an introduction to an article on education. 3 things, we're told, all of them essential. First, stop damaging the planet's life support systems. Second, imagine new and better ways to live on Earth. Third, and most important, change the story about who we are, we humans, not the lords of all creation, but lives woven into the complex interdependencies of a beautiful, unfolding planetary system. This is Kathleen Dean Moore in Orion magazine. Here's another view, represented by Arnie Duncan. We should be able to look every second grader in the eye and say, you're on track, you're going to be able to go to a good college, or you're not. If given more time, I could probably dig up a more really egregious quote, one that talks about global competition, beating out the Chinese, preparing children for the economy, considering the needs of business, the use of standardized tests as a proxy for success in education, improving efficiency, and the claims of school failure that you read often in the press, mostly with paltry attempts to understand those claims. But I think you see my point. There's a tension here, a real tension, and I think it plays out in our schools. The tension. Psychologist Madeline Levine talks about the incredible misalignment between cultural notions of what success in education look like and what's really in the best interests of kids, both in terms of healthy child development and engagement with learning. The good news is that those who care more about the former have lots of support from research now. The centrality of social and emotional development, the importance of diverse learning communities, the value of adult connection to students, the importance of the humanities, the need for experiential learning, all of which we've been talking about today. I don't want to dismiss the economic needs here. I don't want to pretend that children don't need some very specific knowledge, how to write a clear sentence, how to solve a geometry problem, what the causes of the Revolutionary War were, what cells consist of and how they divide. And I know we want all of them to find fulfilling jobs one day. It's just that we know that drilling facts into kids' minds is not education and it's not healthy. Efficiency and education don't mix. Content needs context, the connection between knowledge and lies, between academic content and what children see around them. It requires purpose and discovery. My claim today is pretty simple. There is inherent spirituality in education. We just need to see it, to see that it is linked to our missions and embrace it. And you can see it in all our efforts at innovation too. I was tempted just to put up this one photo and leave it and just walk away. I'm not sure I need to say anything else. It's all right here. Tom Little, if you don't know, was the longtime head of Park Day School in Oakland, California, and one of my favorite educators. He died a couple of years ago of cancer. Just an amazing man. And here he is with his students. And just about everything in this picture is what we are hoping to do. You can see the spirituality here. I love that boy and with the blonde hair too. Just the deep intensity and openness and lack of fear, and Tom leaning in the way he is, and the little girl talking, and the adult who's cut off the top just smiling. You can just see it's a great moment, a learning moment. About the book, Loving Learning. In Loving Learning, Tom Little and Kathleen Ellison take us on a pilgrimage bound for a truthful place in the midst of the fog of war that surrounds our current discourse on American education. This is Michael Chabon, one of my favorite novelists, so it's great to be able to have him write your blurb. I like this quote because I think it's true that the field of education is currently, and may have always been, one of our key cultural battlefields, and this may be the main reason why I've stayed with Independent School Magazine for so long. In the word pilgrimage is also the clear understanding of a higher purpose in our work. I can see I've gotten to the point where I'm supposed to be telling you all about innovation, but don't really have time. But I want to say this in closing, that the Independent School Magazine is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. And I've been spending the last 3 months or so going back through 75 years of education and seeing what people have been writing, and it's amazing. It's an amazing journey. If you ever have 3 months free and you want to go ahead and do some great reading, It's just incredible, especially it started in 1941, and the pre-war conversations about the importance of the humanities versus service to the country. It just sounds like today. It's incredible. But I also saw two things, and I want to mention these two things. One is the great passion among educators, for not only teaching children, but for being a cultural force for a better world. I could see this. You can hear this in everyone's voice, as I can hear it today in this conference and everywhere else I go. It's an amazing community of educators that you are a part of. I think we all believe we're living in pivotal times, and we may actually be doing that now, but somehow we get through it. And what I guess I want to say in the short run, I can talk in the other session about some of the innovations I'm seeing, but in the short run I just want to say, embrace it. This is, what you have to sort of wrestle with some of these questions about, how much content, how much social emotional development. I would never try to impose my views on what you should do, but I'm glad you're the people who are wrestling with it, because I can tell how important this is and I can see the effects of it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Not sure how to navigate all this. All right. Everything everyone has said today has resonated so very much with me, and I agree entirely with Michael. I have been scratching and editing, and I think I'm going to give you a very abridged version of what I had in mind. But when I asked my students what it is that they thought I should share, they said, your story. And I don't mean that I'm going to share my story in that it's all about me, but I think that my story has led me, in part, through this great spiritual journey, which has informed my educational practices, which has led me to this place where I engage daily with my students in a spiritual fashion. And so there's going to be a lot of content slides that I'm going to flip right through. You are welcome to those anytime. But I'm a Colorado mountain girl, and I grew up immersed in and very resistant to the tenets of the Catholic Church. I also have a bit of a radical streak, and I have defended with great conviction my intuitive belief that nature matters. And so I think you'll see that as a part of my journey. But when I read Lisa's book this summer, there was just this aha moment, because I think what she was talking about was so much of what I had always believed to be true. And she was not only giving it voice, but she was giving it scientific validity. So my goal throughout life is embodied in this quote, and it is, to live is to be slowly born, and to become fully alive is the task of one's lifetime. And I live with that idea in mind. How do I become part of humanity with a capital H? And how do I respect and teach others to respect and regard the natural world in which we dwell with honor and respect? So, St. Thomas More was the site of much discomfort for me. I was kicked out of Catholic catechism classes on a regular basis. One very vivid memory is that I asked the teacher why God couldn't be a woman, and he sent me to the hall. So over the course of time, I have done a lot of exploring about religion, and I've happily realized it's a contested category. There's a multiplicity of ways to define religion. One of my favorite is by Sigmund Freud. Religion is comparable to a childhood neurosis. It just gives a little bit of variety and opportunity to reflect on how many different ways people imagine religion in the world. And the backdrop from my own life has been the larger natural world at large. And as I came to reflect on that particular context, I also began to realize that's the world, that's nature, that nature itself is a constructed category, and that both of these terms have meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I started asking the questions. Are humans a part of nature? Does nature shape human nature? Do people impact nature positively or negatively? And I would lay awake at night as a young child contemplating questions like these, which perhaps weren't as articulate at the time, but these are the questions I began to engage with my students. So I'm not going to dwell on these, but it's very interesting. On my board every day I put questions. Sometimes I put quotations. Sometimes I just put a random picture. Sometimes I invite students to do that. And the first 5 minutes of every class, we talk about life. And that 5-minute space to talk about life goes in a lot of different directions, and they know at the end, it's done. We talk about life because life matters. Life matters in terms of asking the big questions, but life matters in terms of where they are in their own life spaces. So I think that's one way I have created spiritual space in my classroom that has nothing to do with overt or dogmatic, faith traditions, although sometimes it can. So throughout my own journey, I've been arrested a couple times, spent a couple nights in jail, but through that process realized that that's not the way to impact change. And I began to learn that there had to be a better way and a more innovative, approach to sharing my convictions. So I went away to the Himalayas. And I spent a year living with monks. The journey is kind of an interesting one. It's not as important as what the outcomes were. But that year was transformative for me. When you're plowing behind water buffalo, or you're watching the monks go feed the mountains, or you're digging up mountain potatoes, you come back with a renewed sense of what really matters. And what matters is the experiences that you're to have in life. So I continued to ask the questions. How are the world's religions and the environmental crisis related? And this idea was not unique to me. There was a series of conferences going on at Harvard about religion and ecology, unbeknownst to me, but they were coming to some answers, and they came to the conclusion, as put forth by Lynn White in 1967, that there was a problem, and religion might have something to do with it. And this began a series of academic inquiries, spiritual activist inquiries, that led to something that we know today in academia as apologetics. And I took that, and I ran with it, and I taught world religions classes, and I was part of the phenomenon where we looked at the different world religions, and we began to see what worked and what didn't work. But then I ended up here as a graduate student, and I wanted to bring all of these things together. So I continued my engagement with the world religions and with the environment. I wrote a couple master's theses, and then I was on to different things. So I found myself in Japan. I was working at a private school. It was a last-minute opportunity. They needed a teacher. But the really neat opportunity that came along with that was to work with a group of monks called the Yamabushi, or those who sleep with the mountains. Women aren't allowed to do a lot of the rituals or austerities, but I was allowed to do some. So they hang people over mountains. They stand under icy cold waterfalls. You are born from the Great Mother Womb by running down the mountain. And this led me to write a paper about the Shugendo and their cosmogonic ecology. And that was something that was transformative in and of itself, because as I came back and got hired at Annie Wright schools, which is where I currently teach, I have been able to bring these different life experiences and some of this different knowledge about the intersection between different religious worldviews and the natural world and the ethical difficulties that we grapple with into, and I didn't count entirely, but in my 13 years at Annie Wright, I think I've taught 14 different classes. But with each of those classes, I've engaged with a particular group of students with where they're at. And part of that has included opportunities, and I was going to speak to the gentleman who asked earlier, how do you bring your students or how do you educate your faculty? Harvard's Pluralism Project had a grant, and after a NEH seminar one summer, I got a couple $1,000s and was allowed to take my students out into the community. So we visited mosques, we visited monks restoring wetlands. We were able to do some of the things that I think otherwise those opportunities don't exist. And then I ended up in pursuit of the questions even further, which led me to my doctorate work, which led me to where I believe innovation is already underway. Through reading Archives of Independent School Magazine and reading speeches by headmasters and looking at historical philosophers, I've really come to understand that this idea of dark green religion, which is characterized by acknowledging nature as sacred, acknowledging the interconnectedness, acknowledging that ecology-based metaphysics are mindful and important, have been a part of education all along. And I was seeing this most prominently in the sustainability trends, or what I'd called greening trends, but I'd also see it in the work of the gardens that were being built. I was seeing it in the work of the students who were wanting to be part of something bigger, whether that was restoring their own habitat on their campuses, whether that was in the creation of art that had to do with larger ecological themes. And I think, as I was reading Lisa's book, the foundations and the opportunity to explore the presence of both explicit and implicit religion in our schools is alive and well, and now we're being granted permission to acknowledge and pursue and develop that. And so in part of my work, I had this idea that independent schools are their own independent communities, and that cultural innovation is underway in each and every one of those communities, with the personalized relationships, with the sanctified ceremonial reifications of whatever matters to that school in terms of its mission and values. We see in the individual classrooms and in the individual communities this sea of change underway toward what I believe is something great. And so I leave you with this thought. I think religion has great potentiality, and I think religion can be defined in many different ways, and that spirituality is a part of that religion. But I get very excited about the ways we can bring that to our students. So I have a minute left here. Let me skip ahead. I take my students outside and I get them into nature whenever I have the opportunity to do so. But more importantly, I think I create the questions and the space for those questions. And that, I think, is where the most spiritual transformations happen. So a couple of the questions that I'll leave you with. How have ecosystems, right, shaped human consciousness, behavior, and history, in general or in religion, and their environment? And I think you can go through, and I'll post these or make these available. And I also use movies, and I use ritual restorations on campuses, and I use political letters. And I just want to show you one last thing. With films, there's a myriad of ways, whether it's in your advisory groups, whether it's in your history classrooms, in your English classrooms, or for your dean activities at large, where you can introduce the idea of nature or the relationship of how religion, nature, and ethics might intersect without ever calling it religion. And I think that space, that creative opportunity, opens up those big questions that make the work that we do so exciting. And I want to show you, just at the end here, I had the opportunity to spend a summer in South Africa at Oprah Winfrey's Leadership Academy, and these girls transformed me because they didn't call themselves students, they called themselves learners. And they taught the spirituality that we've been talking about all day to me in ways that I can only hope we can continue to bring to our students. Thank you.
Well, my name is Chris Tate, and I am last. I can just drop the mic now and we can go. No. So I'd like to thank all the presenters for making my presentation very short. Actually, I could whip through this pretty quick. I don't talk as fast as Seth, even though he's not here, but a little faster than Stephanie. I understand that right now I'm probably into part of your happy hour, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible, but I am a dean of students. Well, let me change that. I'm the dean of the middle school at Porter Gaud, and I'm also a JV football coach. Been there 14 years, been coaching football for 14 years, and I can tell you a lot about middle school boys, that's for sure. We have a great history at Porter Gaud. The school was established in 1867 by an Episcopal priest, and it's a great story. While kneeling at the grave of his 11-year-old son, God came to him and said, "Don't grieve for the dead, do something for the living." And he established the Porter Military Academy for orphans from the Civil War. So we have a very rich history of that philanthropic spirit of Dr. Porter. You'll see at the top of my slide here, WATCH, and that is the model that we have as a school. It stands for Words, Actions, Thoughts, Character, and Habits, and it's taken from Timothy. And we have a WATCH prayer that we recite in our chapels and oftentimes throughout campus, and all the students know it. O Lord, may our words be full of truth and kindness, our actions gracious and honorable, our thoughts unselfish and charitable, our character noble and upright, and our habits virtuous, so that our school family may grow in faith, honor, and knowledge as we watch together in all things. Really quick, really simple. We say it all the time, and it is the framework for how we develop young people. So real quick outline, a little different approach to, yes, character development. I use that word. And thanks to Michael, I have to take innovator out of my bio, so thank you, Michael, for that. Transforming what many of you may have as an advisory program and creating what we call Life 101. So while we think about these terms, character ed, social emotional learning, 21st century skills, soft skills, non-cognitive skills, we just said, you know, this is life. And we called it Life 101, and under that umbrella, we're able to put a lot of things there, and we actually created a curriculum around that. You have to involve the entire community, and then we reinforce it, and then we move on and keep on keeping on, because character ed's not something you do, it's something that's ongoing, right? I'm still working on it myself. Pretty traditional Episcopal ways that you would see this in our schools show up, and from a spiritual life standpoint, We have weekly chapels and Jewish life for the students of Jewish faith. We also have Bible study and vestry in Old Testament, which our students take. Some of these things are also optional for them to pursue their spirituality further. And this is run by our middle school chaplain, who was also a Bantam football coach, and I actually coached him when he was a younger gentleman, so again, we know a lot about boys. So other programs that you might see in our school are kind of traditional. So Life 101 I talked about, and we do teach mindfulness and ethics in that curriculum. And then we have a lot of service projects. One in particular, Bicycles for Humanity, is a middle school nonprofit that I'll talk about in a minute. Then we have, of course, clubs and organizations and your kind of array of things that kids can pursue, whether it's their current passions or new ones. And then we have what's called Generosity of Spirit, and this is interesting. What we do is, this was established by a few teachers, and we recognize students who are, I would say, above on the scale of kindness, gentleness, and helpfulness, and we recognize them with really a certificate, and we call it Gen-Spirit. We recognize them, we reward them, and we raise them up in front of other students as people of high character, and so we also have lots of opportunities for them to participate in things like charities and other causes. And so you can see for a middle school, grades 6 through 8, there's a lot you can do there. And our kids really participate in service and service learning. So Life 101, what we basically did, and I heard a lot of talk today in the K9 doggy breakout session earlier today. One person got that joke. You guys are asleep. Come on. And they said, well, where do you put it? How do you do it? What can you do? Well, if we feel like it's important, you make it just like a regular class, right? So we take things like art and PE and music and stuff like that, and we rotate them. Kids take it every couple of days. Well, now we have Life 101, and kids go through this as a part of their curriculum. It's really not that hard. You just do it. You say it's important, you stick it in there. So you can see the way we do this. We take the whole middle school, we divide them into 3 sections, of course, by grade. One grade's going through mini courses on the left, and those are the topics that we cover in those courses. Another grade will be in a speaker series, which you could consider kind of like an assembly. And then the third grade, not the third grade, but the other grade, we break out into some social emotional learning type things, and this is where I get involved as the dean. And our head of middle school gets involved too. Oftentimes we separate them by gender. So you can see man card up there, right? What does that mean? Well, I spent 4 weeks with the boys to talk about what it means to be a man. I'm still working on that myself, so it's a work in progress. And we talk about things with girls as well, like relational aggression and things like that. So the idea is that rather than put these things in advisory and have all teachers talk about the same thing, we try to bring what we'd call experts to the table. So our chaplain teaches ethics. Our nutrition, our PE folks in health and nutrition teach nutrition. Our learning specialists teach time management. And so it's a way to get what I would call the experts out in front of the students on these topics. 5 minutes. I thought I paid you to let me go a little longer. Okay. So you got to involve the parents, right? We have a middle school guidebook. This is not a handbook of rules and policies. This talks to parents about what they can expect out of their 6th grader, behaviors they'll see with their 7th grader, how to interact with us as a faculty, the things we want to do to teach to the whole child. It's a really interesting guidebook that we created. We talk about it throughout the year. And we also, of course, blog about Life 101, pre and post. And the reason why is if we say we're going to talk about mindfulness with the child on Wednesday and we tell the parents on Monday, it's great dinner conversation. We want to engage the families in the conversations we're having, whether it be social, emotional learning, resiliency, whatever the topic is, spirituality, mindfulness, ethics. We want them to know what we're talking about so they can have those conversations. Otherwise, it's not as powerful. And I don't have to talk to you about mindfulness, but you can see we bring in an expert from the field that does parenting partners, and she does our each grade level in our speaker series, and then we have the mini courses taught by Jennifer Marvel. Again, local people who are professionals in this area. They teach kids all the time. They're in front of families. They're the ones in front of our kids talking about this stuff. And I like the picture of the dog over there, that mindfulness, or mindful. We also get them involved in a lot of reflection. So this is pretty simple stuff to do. You probably have conferences. We have our students lead it. We ask them to do a pre-conference evaluation on what they think they did. How did they do? How are they in class? Did they feel like they got an A? Was their behavior on par with what the teacher expected? And the idea here is that we want them to reflect. Do they know who they are? Right? And then of course, we give them the report card, and then they go through what they really did and what the teachers really thought, and they set goals for the future. In the conference, the advisor doesn't talk, and neither does the parent. The child leads that conversation. And I think that's a very powerful way to make them part of this, and rather than a top-down approach. So here's an example of Life 101. We spent 4 weeks with the 7th grade. I can do this all in 2 minutes. So the first thing that we did was we did some self-reflection. We wanted them to figure out what their purpose was. We went to Franklin Covey's website, and they created a personal mission statement, or a mission statement, a purpose. And what we did was we looked at their values, and they created those statements. And then we found out what those statements were, and we gathered them, all of us did. And we also went through some personality testing. So are they introverts? Are they extroverts? Are they thinker feelers? We wanted more information on them, but we wanted them to be able to reflect on themselves. How do we interpret the world? How do they interpret the world? And then the result was we shared it with everyone. So here's Faith. Okay, Faith gave me her personal mission statement. We responded. I know what kind of personality type she has because she's the same as me. She's an extrovert, intuitive, feeler, and a perceiver. And you can see what we did too. We shared it with teachers and parents, so everyone knows Faith now. It was a very easy thing to do, and you can see up there in Life 101 what she learned, and 4 parts of her life, 4 dimensions: exercise, stay healthy, personal relationship with God. She wants to become a neurosurgeon, and she knows when to talk and when to listen. This is great stuff. This is Faith telling us who she is. We created a nonprofit in the middle school. We believe in service learning and service activism, and we did a lot of things for charities, but we decided, well, let's just make our own charity. So we did. And the way this organization works is we collect used and unwanted bicycles. We buy a shipping container. The kids bring the bikes in. They break them down. We ship them to Africa. And they go to places where people don't have access to water, food, healthcare, and education. Normally it take an hour, 2 hours to walk there. Now they have a bike. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. We fund this all in the middle school through things like Spirit Wear proceeds. You can see the shirts. They design those shirts. We sell those shirts, and we're a school that has uniforms. They can wear those in lieu of their uniforms. Bake sales, and we even have parents involved now in these spin classes, so they go out and raise money for us too. So here's what we have, all the schools involved. We have service project days where they can do this. They earn service hours. They can earn a service award at the end of the year for this. They run the website. They do the Facebook. They do the Instagram. You can see they painted the container down there. They packed it up top. That's my football team. And then field day, one of the events was water balloon toss and bike breakdown. So that was interesting that we did that, and they liked that. And then there's the results. We shipped 450 bikes to Karamoja in Uganda in January 2016. You can see our bikes up there at the top. Those are also Old Testaments that we had in Bible study that we sent as well. The newspaper covered it, and we hope to ship 450 more in 2017. And the parents are involved. They think this is great. The kids love it. The kids do everything. They do it all. We don't do anything. Every bit of this is kids. And really what it says is that one person can change the world, whether you're 12 or whether you're 14. And so what I would say to you is you can change your school too, with a lot of the things that we talked about today. Oftentimes it just takes one person. So, we do things like recognize students through a watch points program. We want to make sure we reward, recognize, and we reinforce the behaviors that we know are going to be valuable in their life. And we make it a competition because kids love that. And if they win, they get ice cream because kids love that. And really we want to catch them doing good. Our teachers are actually involved too. So if they attend sporting events to support their students, they get points for their grade. If kids support other students by going to events, whether it be fine arts or other, they get points for their grade. If they get a Genosphere ticket for generosity of spirit, they get points for their grade. And when we announce this every Friday on Friday morning meeting, they do a drum roll because they love to be in the lead. And the funny thing is our 6th graders are leading the way every time. Nonetheless, it's a great program. And it's just a way to keep watch relevant so that we are watching in all things. Of course, we do mission skills assessment as well. And I have to say that one of the things I'm the most proud of is you can see the constructs down there. One of them they measure that's not up on that board. It's life satisfaction. Our school ranks among the highest in life satisfaction out of any schools in the independent school network that participates in mission skills. So we feel like that's something that we're proud of. I thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you very much. That was 450 bicycles. That's quite a crescendo to our day. Thank you. This has been an extraordinary discussion. We're going to close with a Sufi poet. Javad, come up. And I want to thank you for today. We'll go into discussion group from here. We have one discussion group where we're going to change rooms. Schools of the Sacred Heart from San Francisco are going to go to the 4th floor of Zenkel because there's going to be a video involved, and that has AV. Lauren, what room in Zenkel? 408. 408 for Schools of the Sacred Heart, the breakout group on diversity and plurality. Beautiful, beautiful example of people of many faiths having spiritual practice in a school with a religious heritage. Okay, so Javad, thank you. We'll close with your poem about spiritual children. You want a mic?
Well, I guess they leave the best for last. I thought so. Well, I just got my master's in spirituality, and under the guidance of my savior, Dr. Miller, and hopefully rolling to get my doctorate in art and psychology. Reading a poem about a spirituality that children bring to the household that they come to. You learn a lot through them. You learn a lot by raising them. When the bird calls, the mountains becomes mysterious. I am the bird, and this is my call. Barashit bara Elohim. In wisdom, Elohim creates. God created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim, created he them. Male and female, created he them. Golden child, the warrior child. My son came off the ocean, somewhere between the taste of salt and chocolate. He slipped in his mother's womb at midnight. Moon splashed mercury over the water, and somewhere out there, stars aligned. He is my golden child, deep brown eyes, pieces of bark steeped in hickory, toasted in sweat of almond and ginger, and his smile melts Sophia's heart over the land of Chem, where the east touches the west. He filled the nothingness in emptiness within me. I wrote on paper in calligraphy, Peloroma, not knowing if I remembered it in living or death. Yet the scent of the desert, drenched in aroma of dissolute growings in oases, lost was on his breath, sobering, like life that illuminated him within and out. My son broke my fall. I never fit in my skin, never belong. Constant cravings in me that was not of earth. I yearned for so much, prowling for spirits in kind, beasts that howled and crawled, pushing bones and flesh, threatening to rise. There was no presence in me, for I was far gone, lusting for the moon and my other that had abandoned me, though she shared the cadaver I had become. My son broke my fall, filling my days, my hours, my ambitions, my constitution. All in all, I was taken, beholden, and done. my daughter, came of earth, all spiced, sweeter than sugar cane, a warrior. We stayed in, her mother and I, drawing maps of places far. As the day passed half and the sun was bright, they cut her off her mother, all beauty, all feminine, divine. Descendant of Mitras, noble in her grace, she had the sun in her palms, tall in her presence, all spine. Much aware of that she was. She was my warrior child. In distinction, I held Kirichora, Kiriyachora, not knowing how it came to me in living or death. She had the mystery of mountains in her eyes, the scent of woods at dawn filled with the sweet, sour aroma of merging desires, of instincts and wants, the deliberate currency of life on her breath, sobering. She suckled on her mother's breast hard and shook the heavens and earth if satisfaction was not found. I guess we raised them and they tolerated us. Circling the days with notches on the walls in a glass house drenched in light. And how the days passed by. We painted the downstairs in black and upstairs in white as they walked the stairs up and down.
Very beautiful. Thank you. Javad does poetry workshops with our graduate students, and when I come back a whole week later, they're still in process. So it's quite profound, your work. I want to thank you for bringing your innovation, your spiritually visionary innovation forward, and I look forward to our discussion groups. So we'll break now into discussion groups. Thank you for today, and after discussion group, we'll have coffee, collegial coffee. Thank you.